Welcome to another episode of Out Loud Geek, where we discuss science fiction, fantasy, cooking, the outdoors, and more. On this episode of Out Loud Geek, I'm going to list a set of movies, in no particular order, that all share at least one thing in common. After I watched them, I never wanted to see them again. Each of these films, for various reasons, are for me unwatchable. And a few of the films that are on this list, in some cases, are highly acclaimed. I didn't put these unwatchable films into any particular order because, regardless of the reasons, they are unwatchable. But I will explain the reasons in each case. So with no further ado, let's dig in. The first unwatchable film that I will share is the 1982 musical, Annie. I've hated this movie from the very first time that I ever saw it. The music and the singing is insipid and annoying. And given that a lot of the songs are sung by children, their voices are annoyingly shrill and overly high-pitched. None of the characters are in any way engaging for me, and as much as I like Carol Burnett, I can't stand her role in the film. The next film that I can't stand is another musical, the 1968 Chitty, Chitty, Bang, Bang, that I generally refer to as Shitty, Shitty, Bang, Bang. Similar to Annie, the music in this movie is insipid and annoying thanks to the two very young children whose singing voices are even more annoyingly shrill and overly high-pitched than in Annie. The songs in the movie are repulsive to me, especially the Toot Sweet song, which is the worst song in the film to me. In spite of the fact that I like Dick Van Dyke, Lionel Jeffries, and Benny Hill, their presence in the film doesn't save its unsalvageable plot. When I first saw this film as a child, I was also terrified by Robert Helpman's character of the child catcher, which today I view as being overly annoying as well. Being a fantasy film, all of this film's problems and annoyances make any attempt to suspend disbelief impossible. Another film that I have watched and regretted having done so is Tim Burton's 2001 Planet of the Apes, starring Mark Wahlberg. While I like many of Tim Burton's films, his take on Planet of the Apes was a far cry from the original 1968 version, and Mark Wahlberg's unconvincing acting couldn't compare with Charlton Heston's in the original film. The 2001 version had no compelling messages, and the plot was utterly stupid. Unlike the 1968 version, whose costumes and special effects helped to create an intriguing dystopian universe, the costumes and special effects in the 2001 version were a joke. If there was an award for Most Unnecessary Remake, this film would likely get tens of thousands of nominations. Another film that I watched once and totally regretted having done so was the 2000 piece of crap called Dungeons and Dragons. The only reason that I saw this detestable film was because some of my friends invited me to see it with them in a theater. As this complete piece of crap film played, all I wanted to do was to stand up and walk out of the theater, but I didn't because I was with my friends. I have never watched it again. James Cameron's 1997 blockbuster Titanic, starring Leonardo DiCaprio, was probably one of the most predictable and consequently boring films that I have ever watched. There probably aren't that many people who haven't heard of the tragic ship, the Titanic, that sank over 100 years ago in the North Atlantic, taking over 1,000 lives with it. So with such an overly predictable plot, it's clear that unless you were a young woman totally smitten with DiCaprio, chances are you wouldn't like this movie. Once was more than enough. I never needed to see this boring snooze fest again. Another snooze fest of a movie was the 2001 Pearl Harbor, starring Ben Affleck. This was less of a war movie and more of a maudlin and schmaltzy love story and chick flick that made me wish that I had never seen the film in the first place. In 1974, one of my favorite comedians of all time, Lucille Ball, made the fateful mistake of filming a musical version of the story Auntie Mame with Beatrice Arthur. The result was a musical simply entitled Mame, and is quite literally an unwatchable film. The music and acting is so bad that I have never been able to watch more than a few minutes of this awful movie. My only advice to anyone is to watch the 1958 Anti-Mame, starring the incomparable Rosalind Russell, which is a fantastic movie. If you've watched my video on my declining interest in Star Wars Part 1, which should be linked above, then you'll already know what one of my unwatchable films is, Star Wars IX: The Rise of Skywalker. This film is so bad in so many ways, and in my video series I will likely have one video dedicated to Episode 9 and its numerous issues. Since I'm simply listing movies in this video that are unwatchable, I won't go into much details aside from saying that besides a very poorly written plot, horrible editing, numerous contrivances, and some of the worst retconning in the history of science fiction and fantasy, I could never watch this awful movie again. And consequently, because it's part of a trilogy, I now also can't watch its predecessors, Star Wars VII: The Force Awakens, and Star Wars VIII: The Last Jedi. While I wouldn't have listed The Last Jedi as being unwatchable, it is now because of the fact that it leads into Episode 9. One sci-fi film that I know is hated by many and is not something that I will ever watch again is the utterly horrible Star Trek V: The Final Frontier. Just as Star Wars IX is the worst of the 9 Star Wars Skywalker movies, Star Trek V is very likely the worst of the Star Trek movies. While some may regard Star Trek the Motion Picture as being the worst, 5 will always be the absolute worst for me. The movie has a terrible plot, in which Spock apparently has a Vulcan brother who has rejected logic in favor of finding God. The result is something akin to one of the worst original series episodes entitled The Way to Eden. Maybe if Star Trek V had had some singing hippies instead of Uhura's fan dance, it might have been a more comical and entertaining film, but I say that sarcastically. The plot of Star Trek V needed to be tossed and replaced with something completely different. The last film that I'll list in this video as being unwatchable is the 2016 Batman v Superman: The Dawn of Justice. After barely being able to get through the first hour of this awful film, it started to pick up a bit, but didn't actually start to get good until Wonder Woman, as played by Gal Gadot, came into the film. She was the only watchable and likable character in the entire film, but since she doesn't appear until the film's final few scenes, the rest of the film is simply not worth it to get to her few minutes. I haven't watched Batman v Superman a second time, nor do I intend to. While I have more movies that I could list, I'll save those for another edition of Unwatchable Movies list in the future. For now, I'll close by asking you, the viewers, to share in the comments below what films you consider to be unwatchable, and if any of yours are the same as mine. Thank you for watching today, and thanks to everyone who has subscribed to our YouTube channel. We appreciate your support. If you enjoyed this video, please press the like button below, and please feel free to share a comment. If you would like to see more of our videos in the future and help support this channel, please subscribe right now by clicking on the red subscribe button below. You can also find us on Facebook and Twitter by clicking on the links in the description. Until next time, this is Out Loud Geek.